Hi, this video is about infinitives. An infinitive is a word form that has to plus the base form of a verb. In your grammar book, infinitives and gerunds are together. Grammar books always put them together because they have a lot of similarities. For example, they both have similarities to nouns and verbs. An infinitive, like a gerund, can function as a noun or noun phrase in a sentence. It can play the role of a subject or an object. It can also be a complement after the be verb, and we'll see examples of these on upcoming slides. Infinitives also have some things in common with verbs. They can be followed by a direct object. Infinitives can be negative. They can also turn into passive or progressive or perfect forms, but the infinitive is never a main verb. So all of this is in common between gerunds and infinitives. On this slide, I'm showing some of my old examples that I used in my gerunds video on the left. And we're trying to remember common ways that nouns function in sentences. So we have a subject, an object, object of a preposition, and a subject complement. In the red, you see the gerunds in each case here. On the right side, I'm doing the same thing, showing you how an infinitive could be a subject or an object. Seems to me it cannot be object of a preposition, but it can also be a subject complement, and your book also calls this completer of a subject or subject completer. So let's look at these first examples with infinitives. Here's a subject infinitive. To quit now would not be helpful. To quit is the subject. The verb is would not be. This is an easy way to use infinitives. I don't think it's very common. I think it's much more common to use a gerund as a subject. Number two, an infinitive can be an object. I think this one's very, very common. I plan to take that course next semester. Subject I, verb plan, and to take is the object. I plan what? I plan something. What do you plan? I plan to do this. Okay, and then number four, similar to gerunds, infinitive can also be the complement of a subject. So if you remember, often that's a sentence that has the be verb, and the words that come after the be verb are referring to the same idea or the same person as the subject. So her goal is to finish the ESL program and then apply to a 4-year university. So what is her goal? What is her goal? Her goal equals this, to finish this and do this. So one more time, we're looking at similarities between gerunds and infinitives. Now let's focus on infinitives. I think probably the most common way we use them is as an object. So I'm going to start with that first. Verb plus infinitive, and the infinitive equals the object. So you see subject plus verb, and then an infinitive after. So every grammar book that teaches infinitives has a list of verbs. In fact, they have more than one list for different types of sentences. But there's a list of verbs that are followed by infinitives. Verbs that are followed by. So that means depending on what the main verb is, that exact verb, that's when it's possible that you might see an infinitive come after. So it does not mean that the verbs on the list are turned into infinitives. It means that the verb after those verbs could be an infinitive. I want to point out that that main verb on the list might be written in any verb tense. The tense does not matter. So I made sure to put different examples here. I've got simple past, present progressive, future, and present perfect progressive. It does not matter what verb tense you have. After that verb, you're going to use an infinitive. They managed to do something. He's threatening to do something. She won't hesitate to do something. I've been struggling to do something. So according to your idea, you just use to and the base form. It would be good to look at that list in your book and just practice writing lots of different sentences. Use that verb as your main verb, and then the idea that comes after this blue part is the infinitive. So there are several lists, and some of the lists have different things marked with asterisks because there are a few more details to pay attention to on those lists. Some verbs require an infinitive only. Some verbs require also an object that would come before the infinitive. So my parents encouraged me to work hard in school. This sentence would not make sense if you take out me. It could make sense with a different person. My parents encouraged him or her or somebody else, but an object has to be in that place before the infinitive. With some verbs, an object is optional, and sometimes the meaning changes. So I want to leave, I want you to leave. I think you see the difference, right? I want to leave. Who's going to leave? Me. I will leave. I want you to leave, so you leave, right? I want to stay and I want you to leave. So the meaning can really change. Sometimes you see for someone or for something which comes before the infinitive. He's asked for someone else to make the decision. We are waiting for the air conditioning to be fixed. So for somebody or something, and then the infinitive is in the blue. So one of the biggest questions when students write sentences is to know, do I need to use a gerund or an infinitive after my verb in this sentence? Those lists are the way that you can figure that out, by referring to the list. It's very difficult to memorize all the details on those lists. I don't think many people can memorize that in a short time. So I don't really think there's a quick way to master this in your writing. I think if you spend several years and you do massive amounts of reading and massive amounts of listening, and massive means lots and lots and lots, that's the key. Listen, 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 read, read, read. After about 5 years or 10 years, you will know these in your gut. You won't have to even think about them. You will know them. Your ear will know which way sounds correct because you've seen lots of examples. So some verbs can be followed only by a gerund. Some can be followed only by an infinitive. Some can use either one, and the meaning doesn't really change. So these two sentences give the same meaning. Some verbs can be followed by gerund or infinitive, but the meaning changes. So those are probably the most confusing ones. Your book has a list of those, and it shows you some good examples to clarify those differences for you. Some other ways we use infinitives besides object. So the first way is as a subject. I don't think this is very common. Sometimes people use it for proverbs or sayings. To err is human, to forgive is divine. I think number 2 is very common. Impersonal it with an adjective. So I have some adjectives circled here. It's easy to learn how to use this technology. Easy to do. Something's easy to do. It was hard for him to find a new job. So there's the adjective hard, to do something. And if you want, sometimes you can say hard for somebody. So again, you can use present tense, past tense, it doesn't matter, but the subject is it with the be verb, and then there's an adjective. Linking verb is the be verb or some other verbs. These are verbs that connect the subject and the idea that comes after the verb. This problem seems to be getting worse. The governor's decision was, what was his decision? To keep the schools closed. Okay, here even some more uses of infinitives involving adjectives, nouns, and your book has lists of these words, lists of adjectives, lists of nouns. I think number 3 is very, very common. Infinitive of purpose. When we tell why we do something, we do that all the time. We can use only infinitive, or notice the first example has in order to. It's the same idea. Both ways are fine. In order to stay fit, I exercise at least 5 days a week. Same idea, to stay fit. You can do either way. You can also put the infinitive towards the end of the sentence. Okay, it gets a little fancier when sometimes there's a different form, different verb form of the infinitive. It can be progressive or perfect or passive. So these are a little bit more complicated. So with number 1, I started with just an easy sentence with present progressive. She's managing her busy life well. And then I want to put that idea inside a bigger sentence and say that this, it appears to be this way to me. She appears to be managing her busy life well. So we still have the infinitive, appear to be, but because it's progressive, we use be and we use ing on the other verb. Here's an example with present perfect, and the infinitive changes to she seems to have gotten. Or if it's past perfect, we were happy to have finished. So both ways change to that perfect form. And then passive voice, she was recommended for that scholarship. It was a requirement. Okay, if I want to combine those two sentences, it was necessary for her to be recommended for that scholarship. So those forms are possible too. Something that's a little bit different is called bare infinitive. There's no to, it's just the base verb. Some books call these causative verbs. So I have those verbs in bold. It doesn't matter what tense it is. And the other verb is not infinitive, it's base form. But in the case of help, you can use infinitive or base form, either way. Same thing with verbs like feel, hear, see, and watch. Those are verbs that talk about our perceptions. If the action was still in progress, we use a gerund. If the action was completed, we use a base form. So you can take a look at these. This is just kind of another related issue. I think it's important to not confuse infinitives with other ways that we use to as just a simple preposition. And also don't forget that there are a lot of verbs followed by prepositions. Sometimes the preposition is to. In that case, you would see a gerund after to, not base form. And finally, with this black screen here, I want to say I took a quick look at the book that the 060 class is reading this semester. I just opened up to a random page and I decided I would count how many I found. On that random page, I found 6 examples of gerunds and 8 examples of infinitives on just one page of the reading book. So it seems that maybe we use them both pretty often. Take a look in the things that you read.